What's up, y'all? Picture a community bank under 300 million in assets, fewer than 50 employees, running on a core system so small, most bankers have never even heard its name. For years, that bank had exactly one option for its data: sit on it. The fascinating reality of this dynamic is something we discuss in the interview, and it's about to change for a lot of banks just like it. My guest is Easton, founder of Identify. His company takes messy, locked up bank data, moves it into Snowflake, and connects it to Claude, so a community bank can pose semantic questions against their data. This episode focuses on punching above your weight class and using the modern stack to do it. How a bank with 10 employees can now run the same caliber of customer insight and portfolio analysis as an institution 10 times its size. We talk about why Fiserv, FIS, and Jack Henry are all racing toward the cloud, which is a major signal that every community bank needs to catch. And we get real about the entitlement and provisioning mistake that can turn a new AI rollout into next year's data breach headline. If you run a smaller institution and you would love to run the same tools that the big guys are using, this is a great episode for you to check out. And here's the interview. Lee, welcome to the show. I would love to understand how a mountain biker computer engineer ends up in banking data. Walk us through that story.
Yeah, definitely less of a computer engineer than when I graduated college, much more of a mountain biker. But yeah, I think a series of fortunate events led me into banking. My career started in oil and gas, and I always knew I was going to run my own business. It was just a matter of time. Kind of building some financial stability in my personal life was important for me after college. But the sideline, nights and weekends for 5 years, read the 4-Hour Work Week and read a lot of other entrepreneur books. When I finally left 5 years into my career at ConocoPhillips, I got connected with a guy here in Oklahoma who was out on his own. He was consulting. He was an oil and gas guy, and he was a friend of mine's dad. And we worked together for maybe 6 months once I had left my full-time job to start my own business. And then he eventually became a CIO of BaaS Bank, which is it's a bank here in Tulsa. But at the time, they were doing a lot of crazy, cool, productive stuff. They had raised a lot of capital. They were building their own core. So they were developing a side core. Yeah, man. So that got me in because he was a mentor. He brought us into the relationship with the bank. We got to develop a lot of technology with that bank and learn a lot with that.
That's awesome. It's wild how far one relationship can take you down a path that turns into so many different things. So I would imagine having that kind of front row seat to the happenings of a bank helped you identify a gap in the market. What did that gap look like to you?
Yeah, it was a similar gap that I was seeing in oil and gas. It was, big industry that had been around for a long time, built on technology that just had not advanced. So legacy technology, community banks run on cores, right? Those cores have been around for years and years. And so
decades and decades.
decades. I mean, as long as I've been around, some of these core systems, same technology.
For sure.
That was when we started working with BaaS Bank, that was the first and most challenging thing we experienced. And then that ended up being the gap that we today still aim to address.
And so when I think about cores, I think of just like big, huge accounting systems. So I'm guessing this was like a data play here, helping BaaS Bank turn all this big data into information.
Yeah, that specific use case was around payments. So technically, they're coined as a sponsor bank. In the world of BaaS or banking as a service, they were looking to sponsor some programs. They had, I think, a custodial relationship with one of the largest crypto wallets at the time. And so a lot of files needed to be transferred that contained transactional data. That was the primary challenge, was just reconciling which ledger for which system. And it was just a lot of legacy systems that did not speak in the same format.
Okay. So would you be able to break down, for those who may not be familiar with Identify, what you guys do, the place that you guys sit at in the market?
Yeah. Identify started professional services to help banks leverage their data. we were building dashboards and Power BI and Tableau and all these different tools. That lasted about 6 to 12 months. The problem we kept running into was, there's no standard around the data, and every system accessing that data became challenging. So our mission shifted. Today our mission is just help banks solve fragmented data and help banks access their own data. Wild to say that because we know it's theirs, but they just have challenges getting to their own data. So we provide data warehouse, and now we provide BI tools and AI tools for the bank. We package that together. So identifies kind of a one-stop shop for a bank to get access to all their own data and then start using it. We're a big Snowflake partner. So we do a lot of the infrastructure warehousing through Snowflake. And then we're now a Anthropic partner. So we do a lot of the analytics reporting and usage of data through Claude.
Got it. So you guys are partnering with Snowflake, doing a lot of work with them. I see that FIS, Fiserv, they're also moving to Snowflake. What does that signal to the market from a wider perspective? What's happening here? What's the bigger narrative?
Yeah. The big narrative is that all the banks are moving to the cloud. And so Snowflake was the platform we used when I was at ConocoPhillips. So my background in oil and gas is it gave me some insight on a really great tool to orchestrate data. When I started this business and started working with banks, I felt like Snowflake was a bit overpowered for what we needed. What's wild is I think once we got to a large enough client, large enough bank with large enough transactional data sets, we started using Snowflake with banks in about 2022. At that time, it was like the industry still didn't trust cloud. Like the one big bank we brought on that year that we had this huge Snowflake deal with, they had never done anything in cloud. And a lot of the concerns were around the security of cloud. And I'd go to Acquire, Be Acquired conference every single year. And every year for about 3 or 4 years, it seemed like conversations around moving to the cloud got more productive, and more productive. To me, it was just mind blowing that this whole industry still didn't trust it, like coming from that background.
And when
But
you
now
say
that
they don't trust it, some people like to host it, some people like you to host it in the cloud.
yeah,
Do you find that, people just like they wanted to take it on managing it themselves? I mean, it seems like such a hassle for community institutions to deal with keeping it on site and having the expertise to handle it.
yeah. For those that were managing data to any extent, they preferred to have it locally hosted in a SQL environment with their own servers. For those that had maybe grown a bit at scale, they would host in a data center, maybe locally or in their region, and then they would have an IT provider maybe that supported that data center, supported their servers in that data center. But for whatever reason, like to them, that was way more secure and way more efficient than leveraging Azure or AWS. That has completely changed. There are still banks that have a lot of on-prem infrastructure and data center related infrastructure, but it's moving, and I think there's a lot of momentum. I think what had to drive it was ultimately all these tools that are in the cloud. I think the usage of, new products, digital banking, and new tools drove banks to look at cloud solutions so that they could integrate with those new tools and bring customers better products.
How do you feel like the perspective on-prem versus in the cloud has changed for, let's say, community banks over the last 5 to 7 years?
Since I've only been in about 5, I would say that the perspective has gotten a lot better. You asked earlier about, FIS and Fiserv moving to Snowflake. I was placing a bet in 2022 that banks would start moving to the cloud. I think the first announcement was Jack Henry doing Google Cloud, and that was around 2022, and that was a good sign. There was a very slow adoption, and I don't think it rolled out nearly as fast as they thought it would, but I think they started some stuff with Banno and Google Cloud and Google BigQuery. That was a great sign. Then we saw Fiserv announce a relationship with Snowflake late 2022. That took a little bit of time for them to kind of turn that into a product and name it. But I started seeing these signs that if the big core providers are making initiatives to move to these large cloud partners like a Snowflake or Google Cloud, then I was right on the money. I knew it would happen. If the cores do it, the banks are eventually going to have to, or they're going to start
Sure.
trusting it. And now FIS and Fiserv are Snowflake partnered. FIS has a lot more detail, and like they're using DBT, and I think they're using some Databricks pieces, but they're rolling this out to customers as like data management as a service, which I love. Fiserv's been working on it a little bit longer directly with Snowflake, Google Cloud, and Jack Henry. They've been doing it, I think, the longest. And so now every bank is aware of those cloud providers. They're trusting of those cloud providers because their core provider is also using them. So I think that we're past the hump, and now we're actually trusting it. So
And
here
so
we
you
are,
had people,
2026.
so you had CIOs, let's say, who were like, you mean to tell me that we're going to send our private NPI offshore to who knows where and trust, like that whole skeptical narrative has been replaced with, well, I don't want to hire people here to manage it when I can just offload it to the cloud. The trust factor is there. Cool.
Yeah, and that's what's been great for our business. We were a bit early in what we were doing, and I knew it would just take a little bit of time. So I was trying to find those banks that were already showing signs of, I don't know, want to say, a lot of innovation. If they were doing a lot
Okay.
of innovative
Punching above their weight,
things,
maybe.
punching above their weight. So most of the banks we started working with early on were sponsor banks. So these were banks that were partnered with like
And you're
Chime or
saying
Cash App.
you're talking like challenger banks.
Yeah. Well, they're banks. They were working with challenger banks. They were like
Got it. I see. The coastal communities of the world.
bingo. Yes.
Okay.
So that
Got
was
it.
that was one of our early clients as well.
Oh, cool. Eric Sprink, man, what a guy.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a great dude. So
Yeah.
those are the banks we went after first because we knew they had a much larger data set, so they had a data problem. We knew that that data problem likely couldn't be solved with locally hosted services and infrastructure. So it was a great starting point. 2022, 2023. Now the rest of the market has kind of caught up, and your traditional, $350 million bank in small town of Oklahoma is actually going to trust the cloud and use cloud services.
Awesome. Well, I don't think the pendulum is gonna be swinging the other direction anytime soon here. So, you talked about Anthropic. I'd love to unpack what you have going on with Anthropic here. I know that one of the big concerns around utilizing AI is that you are, gonna be exposing sensitive information to who knows who, where, how it's gonna be, like the whole AI world is still so bleeding edge that there is a lot of hesitation around leaning into the technology. What's going on with you guys and Anthropic, and how does that tie into what you guys are doing for banks?
Yeah. Our Anthropic relationship it's the same thing we have with Snowflake. They've got a partner network. Theirs is just getting rolled out. I think this month, June 2026, was like the floodgates opened for Anthropic certified partners. So we started this path with Snowflake in 2022. We had got a big client. We did a big Snowflake build. So we explored, what's called SPN, Snowflake Partner Network. We got certified. You have to do a series of training and testing, and then you get certified. You pay a fee. You get into the partner program, and that's been awesome. So they send us a lot of leads, which is great. Same thing is
Amazing.
happening with, same thing happening with Claude. They've got CPN, the Claude Partner Network. You get certified. You go through, I think at least 10 architects have to be fully trained. And once you get certified, they're same thing. You're going to qualify in like an industry segment. So for us, it'll be financial services, and any bank that goes to set up Claude on their own that needs a certified partner could come to us. On the provisioning side, I think that is probably the biggest call out and the biggest concern that I have. If banks aren't at least setting up Anthropic with a enterprise edition and all the default security, then we're going to have problems. And it's going to happen. I
Mm,
think it's a matter of time until there's some sort of bank that hits the headlines for data breach or whatever, because they just didn't provision it right. This actually happened with Snowflake in 2023.
mm,
So Snowflake has a pricing tier called Business Critical. Business Critical is what we tell every bank to sign up for. It's $10,000 a year minimum. But by default, all the security settings are correctly provisioned. Access settings are correctly provisioned. Well, some bank had an IT employee that was dabbling with Snowflake, and instead of they didn't want to go in and spend $10,000 and
Oh,
do business critical, so they signed up on the website using a what's called an on-demand or a pay-per usage account, which is the same thing if you go set up Claude and use a personal
oh
account.
no.
Nothing, nothing is
At the
provisioned.
personal account at the enterprise level, what can go wrong?
What can go wrong? And a password got leaked.
Oh no. Oh gosh.
So I'm fearful. I think, IT leaders and banks need to get ahead of this right now. It's already late if you haven't. Employees are going to be setting up Anthropic accounts, and your job is just to make sure they do it through an enterprise. Because if they go set up personal accounts and run it on desktop on their machine, you're at risk.
L
Is that?
Let me, try out on a topic that I think is interesting right now, which is AI readiness. If you've got, let's say, 30 seconds with a CIO, what are the top 3 things you would tell them to do to be AI ready at their institution?
Yeah, that's a cool question. AI readiness from my perspective, being a data provider, is to have clean data. Now, I think from a like if I were a security company, it'd be a whole different step one. But from our perspective, to make any of these tools really useful, you have to have a good data model. They call it a semantic model, but you need to have a semantic model developed. That way, when you're querying through the tool, like ChatGPT or Claude, you're getting accurate results and you're not getting results that are maybe pieced together.
And so you're talking
You can
about, hey, when was how many, accounts were opened by people walking in the door at the branch on Main Street?
exactly. Yeah. What's our deposit runoff, across all of our digital banking customers, stuff like that. Like it will try, and if it has access to the data, it will try harder. But you you want to develop that model first and then produce that model. I will say, I think from a CIO's perspective, though, probably the most important thing is the security side. It's like to get AI ready, your organization, whoever's going to use a tool, probably needs to go through some basic training. I would say work on, and this is I would say this to not just a bank. This is just to a business. Like as a business using AI, provisioning is probably the most important thing because if you're not careful, you will have mountains of technical debt. People will be creating chats and projects and agents and skills
Oh,
in
yeah.
20
Oh,
in
yeah.
20 different silos. And then the problem that we aim to solve with the tool only gets worse. Like we only deepen our problem around silos, and that needs to be addressed out the gate. We've learned that lesson in my own company, and now we have standards like what do we name projects? All the projects are named with a naming convention. Skills are named with naming conventions. Organization wide settings for how we use skills. All
Mhm.
that stuff needs to be defined.
Usage and consumption.
Everything.
It's such
And
a
like
huge topic, and we're all new at it.
yeah,
Everybody's new at it right now.
yes. Like when to use Opus versus Sonnet. Like those things
Yes.
have to happen. And then you create the data model in the back end with your data warehouse. And then you start using it.
Yeah. People using Mythos to see what the weather's gonna be.
Exactly. Exactly. It will happen. It will happen. You
Yeah.
give people a tool with no guidance and just be ready for the worst.
Where are you seeing the delta opening right now between banks who are doing these things and going through the motions here and those that are not or not ready to?
Man, I
Like,
see.
are they bagging more new accounts? Are they better at capturing Gen Z customers? Are they underwriting better? I'm curious what you're seeing as because you guys are working with such a big cross section of the market.
Yeah, I think the problem being solved first and foremost that's been an attractive data use case for the last few years is customer insights and in more specific, like marketing related strategy. So out of the gate with any AI tool, banks are just trying to understand like what is the breakdown of our customer portfolio? How many of them are checking, savings, cards, CDs, loans? That analysis alone takes a lot of work with all the different tools and systems the bank might be using. Being able to do that in a quick query and break all that out. So out the gate, that's typically where we see it go. What they do with that information is kind of different. Like culturally, if they're if they're a very proactive organization, they can start assigning out marketing tasks and sales tasks and relationship building tasks. They can take, branch level activity and focus on like changing roles or leadership. Some of the banks look at it as like an operating efficiency thing, like can we hire less in certain areas because now we don't need to spend as much time
Right.
hand holding a customer for onboarding, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I heard an interesting conversation with the All In podcast. There's a lot of critiques of this podcast, but they were talking about how there's so much fear mongering about the disruption to employment from AI. These guys are like classic kind of capitalists. They don't see that being the case. They really see it as being an enabler of further extraction of great ideas from human beings. Really like an imagination problem that we have in terms of what AI can do to support what they're doing in their day to day. How do you see AI supercharging the output of what a bank offers to its customers?
Man, it's a big transitional season for banking when AI is adopted. All the potential use cases and outputs that they had for their data become realized almost within that first week, maybe that second week when they start using an AI tool. It's wild to watch. Every bank wants to know more about their customer, and it's just always been so locked down. And this is the thing that kind of like frees it, right? And
Right.
now they don't have to know SQL. They don't have to know how to like get in there and code to understand more detail or like
It's
click
that
through an old.
semantic component now is enabling more people to join the party.
Yes, it's kind of wild. Like the CEO of a small community bank can explore a data set about his entire business, his entire organization.
Amazing.
And that's a game changer because community banks are small businesses, and that's big.
So AI allows such a greater uptake of information into the institution. And it's one thing to be able to streamline all that data, but it really is only powerful if there is a commensurate output of activities, right?
Yeah.
Sending out pre approved offers, whatever that may be. Where do you see the bigger challenge being? Bringing the data in a cleaner, smarter way? Or once that's done, the output, the getting the pre approved messages out the door, right? Like doing something with the information, the tactical happening.
Yeah, the clean and unified data, that's the problem we aim to solve. We think it's going to get easier and easier because of the AI tools. We can start building skills for every single data set that we bring in. And then those skills are repeatable and reusable. And like, I expect banks to be pretty good at eventually self-serving on their own data sets. We tell banks that if they're exploring AI tools to do their own testing, do an extract of card transactional data or ledger data for 30 days, delete all the rows and columns that might indicate PII, so customer names and addresses and stuff. So scrub your data, but then load that file of 30-day activity into Copilot, load it into GPT, load it into Claude, use the same prompt side by side, look at your outputs, determine what looks best to you, what tool brings the most value. It almost always points to Claude. But in that exercise, we're asking them to take an extract of however they can get it without any clean. And I think it's only just going to get better and better and better at recognizing patterns and trends and types of data sets that, like, I'm not going to say we're going to identify will be out a job. We will just provide the tools in a packaged format so the banks can, run these kind of exercises themselves. My goal is to focus more on getting banks to becoming self-servable, like
Sure.
building versus buying. I want to equip them so they can start building. On the other end, like the action items, the things that they need to go do once they get the result from the query, that's outside of scope for us. We can share experience and feedback, and we can talk about what other clients of ours are doing and help motivate maybe ideas and provoke thoughts. But like, I think there's even a space there for consultants to come in, like maybe even more opportunities for consultants to come in and guide some of that strategic work if the bank isn't capable of doing that themselves.
That makes sense. I was a former partner executive in Fintech, and so my brain is kind of wired like this, but you guys are at one end of the spectrum where you're cleaning the data, you're getting the data prepped and ready for kind of bigger and better things. You also then have fintech players who are at the other end, right? That are like ready for you to hand them the ball to run down the field and open up those accounts, drive adoption, increase deposits, whatever it may be. Like the Vertus AIs of the world. We had Tyler Brantley on the podcast a while back, and these guys would love to have clean, streamlined data because it allows them to do all of their kind of business development, growth related actions with the clean data.
Man, yeah. So you're hitting on a couple things that we are moving into that we're like excited about, I guess. Optimistic, I think, is our focus right now. Just partnerships and distribution channels. If we can provide the platform for banks to then start querying their own data and using their own data, they can also become more nimble. So they can go find best in class vendors. They don't necessarily have to worry as much about core integration anymore. They've got a data warehouse, they've got an infrastructure that they can build on top of, which would hopefully empower partners that they bring on too. So the partner might be on Snowflake as well. The partner might be on AWS, and you've got cloud connectivity. Kind of that's back to like the cloud conversation. If all the banks start moving to the cloud, we can start taking advantage of cloud connected services, and we don't have to use APIs. Like, we will probably ship files for as long as we have to in this industry. We'll skip APIs. Like, there are companies that use APIs, but the natural evolution is to move to cloud connected services where you're privatizing and sharing like an AWS bucket and and Snowflake has that technology. Google has that technology. They're all doing it. It's just not a lot of people have moved to it yet because you still have parties that are on prem. But once we get cloud native, all these partners, all these vendors, we would like to provide some sort of marketplace for our banks. We would need to go build out those relationships with those partners. But we do this a lot right now with card issuers and fraud companies. Those are like the two biggest vendors in the mix that we work with is fraud, like transaction monitoring tools. And if they have a file format that they need to ingest from a bank, we typically build that into our mapping. When we start with a bank, let's say they're on Verifin or Sardine or whatever, we will provide that mapping so that they can go partner with that fraud vendor and easily connect and pass data along.
Nice. That's awesome. Feel free to plead the fifth on this question, Lee. But as a founder, how are you thinking about your moat with the advent of AI here?
Yeah. I think like 3-year plan for us, the moat is just Anthropic. We want to be a strong Anthropic partner, packaging Anthropic with Snowflake in Azure, AWS, like that tech stack we built it, we developed it in Terraform. We can roll it out by pushing a button. And then we have a bunch of other buttons we can press for DCI or CSI or COCC or FIS, whatever. So our goal is to create a moat around accessibility and like ease of integration for the data stack that a community bank would have. Sure, we'll have competition in that space. And of course, I hope to see banks building this themselves over time. But when a company like ours, every bank we work with, we typically come across one or two new data sources. That becomes a skill. And that skill we then train into our model. And then that creates value for the next bank we work with. Mm-hmm. And so I see the flywheel starting to gain momentum. Every relationship we add creates value for the next 2 or 3. And that becomes our moat.
Okay. So essentially deepening the productization of what you do through your partnerships, through your distribution channels, making it kind of more plug and play for your clients.
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. So Lee, I understand that you guys are working with Anthropic, the newly minted kind of winner of the AI race, it seems, surpassing OpenAI. For an institution who, let's say, is a little guy looking for a strategy to punch above their weight class, how do they work with you and Anthropic to do this?
Yeah, we just recently signed this exact bank. We've got a customer we just brought on out of Colorado. This bank is less than 300 million in assets and less than 50 employees. Like, never before would this bank be able to interact with all of their core data, all their LMS data in such a way. Like, financially, they wouldn't really be able to hire Identify to build them anything custom in Power BI or Tableau just because of the cost, engineering hours. But with a tool like Claude and our ability to get the data cleaned and move to Claude and securely connected, we're going to let them do a lot of the development around what they want to see out of that data set. So we're kind of packaging this and empowering them. What this means is, I mean, this is novel. This is call it, 2,000 FIs in the US are probably right in this same category. They're on a really small core provider. They're not on one of the big three. And there's a lot of banks out there that just want to unlock that core data. And I get that these smaller cores probably want to roll out some AI tools. Like, it makes sense that they would, but why even try to compete when you have something like Claude and best in class, right, for natural language querying right now, especially around financial services. Like, Claude is really good at financial data, and that's what these banks have. And so this is going to be a huge win for them because it's going to put them way above their peers in how they use that data and what they can use that data for. We're still in implementation, so a month or so from now, we're going to look back on, what use cases they were able to uncover with this data, like comparing local markets, local lending peers, customer segment groups that they maybe didn't know they had. All that insight, they're going to work through over the next month or two, and then we're going to reevaluate. But that level of research would never have been possible. One, because of the finances of this smaller bank. Hiring an agency at professional service rates would just be too costly. And then also the limitations just from the core provider with no, deep research or analytics tools. And it's all unlocked because of Claude.
Amazing. So your collaboration with Claude has essentially brought, tier one capabilities way down market to true community institutions.
Absolutely. And that's I think the most pivotal thing for Identify in 2026 is we've opened up our total addressable market, where we were normally working with banks from 500 million to about 5 billion in asset sizes. Now we can tap into these banks that are 50 million in assets to 500 million in assets with 10 employees. Like, we have a really strong prospect right now that has 15 employees. It's
Wow.
a little, $50 million bank. And, they're on one of the smaller core providers that doesn't have a ton of reporting and analytics tools, but we know we can get a data extract. And so our partnership with Snowflake and Claude enables us to clean that data, stage that data, securely connect all the tools, and then roll that interface directly through Claude to the bank.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, I would love to stay in touch with you guys after this client goes live and to just see, like, what are you doing now with this new super powered capability come, let's say, end of July, maybe early mid-August.
Yeah, superpower is exactly what it feels like.
That's awesome. Well, Lee, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Where can people follow what you guys are doing?
Yeah, we post a lot on LinkedIn. So look up my own LinkedIn page for Lee Easton, look up Identify on LinkedIn. And then our website, goidentify.com. There's a lot of content we like to put on that, and excited to be here. Thank you for your time and invitation today, Roland.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.